The IPCC is the United Nations body responsible for assessing the science related to climate change. It was established in 1988, and several working groups were set up to assess different aspects. Its latest report is the sixth assessment of the scientific evidence. It's 80 years since the last review. A lot has happened since then. This new report sets out stark evidence for human impact on climate change, with rapidly accelerating increases in greenhouse gases, record temperatures, melting ice, sea level rise, and extreme weather, ranging from flash floods to drought and wildfires across the planet, including the poles. Scientists say the evidence is clear, and unless we make bigger reductions in carbon emissions more quickly, an accelerating climate crisis could become a catastrophe.
The world is at a climate crossroads. The decisions nations make in the next few months will likely determine whether we will or will not ultimately limit global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. In fact, we're on the opposite track, heading for more than a 3-degree rise. We need to change course urgently and before it's too late.
Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide build up in the atmosphere and trap heat from radiating out into space. Rising concentrations correspond to higher temperatures, and they're at record levels. One of the defining measures of CO2 in the atmosphere was established by Professor Charles Keeley in 1958 from samples taken from a mountaintop in Hawaii. His son has now taken over as the keeper of the Keeling curve, and the latest data shows levels continuing to rise at an accelerating rate.
It is a very clear indicator of the global buildup of CO2, but you can also see the background levels just rising and rising and rising. An accelerating rise that's just absolutely skyrocketing. The rise in CO2 in the last decade is faster than ever. So not only are we at the highest levels ever, we're also rising faster than ever when you look at it on a 10-year time frame.
Remote sensing observations are another key source of data, and the European Space Agency has a growing number of satellites gathering vital data to track a range of factors feeding into climate modelling. This helps scientists develop more accurate assessments of what's happening to the Earth's environment.
We're providing a lot more reliable evidence for the climate science and for the climate assessments like the IPCC report. And we can monitor floods and we can monitor wildfires. We can monitor land surface temperature as well, and I think that's a massive asset for science, and it's a massive asset for Europe. Climate change is certainly very serious. My biggest concern is that we're not doing enough to mitigate it. I often think that politicians won't really worry too much about climate change until the seawater is lapping at their feet. Of course, by that time, it will be very difficult to recover from the damage we've done.
One of the big issues is land ice melting off the Greenland ice sheet, Antarctica and elsewhere, contributing to big rises in sea level. US Space Agency NASA has a team looking at this process right now, concluding a 6-year study called the Oceans Melting Greenland Project, abbreviated appropriately to OMG, as the results are indicating.
The warming we've caused in the climate means that over the long run, probably most or all of the Greenland ice will melt. If the oceans are a big part of the ice loss, then we really have to worry that they're going to melt the glaciers very quickly, and we'll see sea level rise of 1-2 feet from Greenland alone in the next century or so, and that would be really devastating.
Hundreds of experts have analysed thousands of sources and tens of thousands of comments in the process of compiling the IPCC's latest report. The ratification of the final version has taken 2 weeks. It pulls no punches and is deliberately provocative to stimulate urgent and meaningful action from world leaders and their policymakers.
Throughout this cycle, we have been telling the world that science has spoken, and it's now up to the policymakers for action. And recognizing the fundamental threat from climate change, the public is likely to have a high expectation for science to tackle the climate change challenge.